Okay, so this is the tutorial for your headscarf design. Looking at the previous designs, I decided that I wanted a symmetrical design. So I've started by drawing some grid lines across my square. Firstly, diagonally from corner to corner, and then vertically and horizontally. It just gives me an area to then work in and split it up so I can apply my design in a symmetrical way, or in this case, I've actually split it into four. So I've decided with doing a fish design for my headscarf. So I've chosen a simplified cod, which was in your pack, and I've chosen to do it in a curved sort of like pattern. Looking at the previous headscarves and the examples that you've got, there seems to be some sort of like repetition either of shapes or of images throughout the designs. So that's why I've chosen to split it into this four and to have sort of like this nice curve which follows the shape of the square round. So I'm using a pencil, sketching really lightly the shapes out, just so that I can sort of like map out whereabouts the fish is going to go in each quarter. I think it looks quite successful at this stage. I've also decided that I'm going to add a little border around the outside of my headscarf. Picked that up from some of the examples as well, and I'm just going to use a simple geometric design of zigzags, sort of like emulating a fishing net or a netting or some sort of stitching. Okay, I'm going to go back into my design now, and I'm just going to fill it in some of the gaps. Once again, repeating the design in each of the quarters. I'm doing a simple seaweed shape, nothing too complex, and repeating that in each of the areas. And then to fill the other space, I'm going to do a simplified version of some fishing net, which follows the shape of the fish, that curve, and comes towards the centre of the headscarf. It'll create this nice sort of like pinwheel effect and give it some motion and flow. Okay, so finished off my design in pencil. Now that I'm happy with it, I'm just going to go over and refine it with a black pen. Okay, you don't have to do this. At this stage, you might want to go over your design if you're happy with it in pencil, a little bit harder. You might want to use coloured crayons at this stage. You might want to use biro, or you might want to leave yours quite sketchy. But I quite wanted a bold, graphic, geometric design, so that's why I've decided to use black fine liner. Okay, you can see that I'm going over my design, refining each of the sections, just making sure that my shapes are precise and as even as possible and similar as possible. At this stage, I'm not thinking about doing any different thicknesses of lines. That would come later once I've got the full design penned in, and then I can see what it looks like as a whole and whether or not I actually need to add any further details to it. Okay, I'm going around the border now, using a ruler to get nice precise lines and thinking about how I can add in the stitching effect. Okay, at this point I'm starting to think about a colour combination that I could use. I'm going to stick with a colour story of 3 colours, so I'm going for red, blue and white, something quite patriotic, and I'm adding that into the stitching on the outside, just with a red fine liner or red pen. Okay, if you've not got colours, don't worry, you don't need to use colour. You can keep it into black and white, maybe just with some shading with pencil crayon or a pencil. I'm then going to go over it a little bit with blue. I didn't think the red stood out quite enough, but I thought sort of like the two-tone mix in the edges would work quite nicely and would draw your attention into the middle. Okay, the reason why I've chosen to use only a limited colour palette is on the previous examples, you can see that there's not a full range of colours. It's not like a rainbow. They've really thought about how they could use a limited colour palette effectively. Okay, so I'm now going in with my blue fine liner, adding in some more details into the fish, like the lines on the scales, and now I'm thinking about adding larger blocks of colour by using a pencil crayon and creating this gradient effect on the netting, just to make it stand out a little bit more. Remember, this doesn't have to be realistic or real to life. You'll see in a second. So I'm going to start to add some red. I'm going to add some red seaweed in there. just following once again that colour theme of red, blue and white. And then finally adding in some depth into the mouth of the fish, some final little details and a little bit of gradient shading onto the fish just to make that pop from the background. I could have added colour into the background, but I've chosen just to do it on the objects that I've drawn and repeating that in each of the 4 sections. And there's my finished design.